All right. It is the time for the hour, and I'm Alan Levine from OA Global. I am not in Brisbane, Australia, but this demo is kind of in line with it to help seed some interest. And I'm very excited to welcome to the studio Delmar Larson. Of course, you can read his bio, Professor 2, from LibreTexts. Hello, Delmar. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Alan. I'm happy to be here virtually.
Yes. And so, yeah, this was kind of my idea, to pin things, of course, that are of current interest, bridge it with what, we hope to stimulate when we're down in Brisbane, but just that I see everything that you're doing. Well, I see everything you're doing. I see that you're doing interesting things. And I just said, well, it's just good to have this in the mix, whether it's conference related or not.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, it's a little creepy that you're seeing everything we're doing, but that's
that was a bit of an overestimate, actually. I might just have to dial that back. So give us like the high level first. I mean, we will first rule of having rules about no slides is that we're going to break that, and that's okay. It doesn't really matter. I know we're going to get to a demo of Adapt, and at least I will get a chance to see what's going on. But tuning in, you're probably coming from home office in Santa Cruz, right?
I'm just outside of Sacramento, University of California, Davis. Yes,
of course. Yeah.
In the grand scheme of the world, very close to Santa Cruz, but in California, a decent distance away.
There you go. All right. So give us what are we going to demo today, and what are we going to talk about?
Great. So for those of you that are familiar with the LibreTexts project, we've been around the block for a while, about 16 and a half years. And for most of that time, we've been focusing on OER textbook construction and distribution. In fact, we distribute about 1 million page views a day. We host about 1.2 million pages of OER content, which makes us the largest and most popular, at least online, repository for OER content available. Our traffic reflects that. However, it's also clear for anyone who's paying attention to academia, certainly for faculty, that we need more than just textbooks in the classroom. And we wanted to build a homework system to accompany our textbook libraries a long time ago. In the first couple of years of our creation back in the late aughts. The problem that we had here is it's not easy in order to have a homework system and to build it. It's significantly more complicated than just having a database and an editor in front of it, which is largely what most editing platforms or authoring platforms are. So we partnered with a handful of different people over 12 years, and each of those partnerships collapsed. For a variety of reasons, but most of the reasons were because of a mission mismatch. So we believe strongly in what OER is able to do for education. And that is predicated on open access to the material. However, individuals that saw our traffic and saw the amount of money that they can make if they charged some amount of money, they started seeing dollar signs, and then we started having a mission mismatch, and then that collapsed. And it wasn't until relatively recently, in part to a U.S. Department of Education grant that we received back in 2018, and then a sizable amount of support from the California Education Learning Lab from the state of California, did we actually start to create the homework system that we wanted to be able to have the same power as the library infrastructure we have. It's called Adapt, and that's what I'm going to be discussing today.
All right, so let's just jump right into the overview, and we can give like a preview of what we're going to get to.
Great. Is my screen showing? It is. Yeah. There we go. Okay. So in the comments, there should be a URL link that's reflected in that QR code. If anyone wants to pull up a phone, you can click that up. If you want to click on it, feel free to do so too. And it gives you a formative demo area for you to play around with the Adapt homework system. So Alan gave me permission to give 11 slides. I'm going to try to go through it really quickly, and then I'll go through the ADAPT homework system that we've been creating for the last 4.5 years. Uh, so I mentioned this before, but I like to mention it whenever I give these discussions about why we do what we do. And we do it because of this core value, recognizing that students are not a market to exploit, nor to make a profit off of. I should step back here and I should say more, not to make an unreasonable profit off of that. I understand that everyone's a market to one company or another, but the key point is that as a faculty member, I felt that I should not be the final chain in a series of events that ultimately exploits students. And also results in increasing inequities in our education. Now, as a whole, what we're trying to do is to break the golden handcuffs. And golden handcuffs is essentially our term for what commercial publishers provide faculty that faculty willingly put onto their hands. So if a commercial publisher comes in, they provide, here's a textbook, here's a homework system, here's ancillary material, here's slide decks, here's interactives, and now here's AI. And they have this whole portfolio out there. And what commercial publishers have been doing in the last few years is starting to shift their business model from the actual textbook as the core financial component and move it to these other components that they have a lot more control over, including homework and things like that. So you've been looking at the cost of homework. That is online platforms that you're able to grade automatically, or at least facilitate the grading of, has increased in cost significantly from $40 per semester, even into some fields up to $100 per semester per course, which can add up quite significantly. So if we focus exclusively on OER as textbooks, we're missing a significant issue that we're trying to deal with. Ancillary materials and AI are also things that we need to deal with. They have their own focus on it. AI, I look forward to being able to talk about again in a year as I start to release the stuff that we've been doing off here. So nonetheless, we're trying to break the golden handcuffs commercial publishers put out there. And that means not just making textbooks, but making homework. We wanted to build this, as I mentioned before, for a very long time. And part of the reason that it took a long time for doing is that we had a lot of criteria we wanted to make sure that the homework system was able to do. We wanted to make sure it was flexible. So it's not one specific field that's out there. I oftentimes argue that chemistry is the best field that we should be studying, but I understand that there's more out there to study than just chemistry. It needs to be dynamic. It needs to be comprehensive. It needs to be integratable. It needs to be LMS agnostic. No one LMS covers the full scope of things out there. It needs to be powerful. It needs to be free or nearly free in order to address that goal that I mentioned before here. And trying to address all these things simultaneously has been quite tricky. I'm very happy in order to get to something that I'm very excited in order to be able to present. So anyways, the upshot in order to be able to do that is to do this efficiently and slowly. And more importantly, to rely on open source capabilities, the coding equivalent of OER, not to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to, because there are lots of people who have created homework systems out there to address different fields or even be able to address the same field. And why come in and recreate the wheel that's out there? So in other words, following the sharing is caring model underlying OER and open in general. So ADAPT, which I'll be showing momentarily, is a bit of a complicated chimera of things because of the way that we approach this. The idea behind here is recognizing that no single technology is able to handle all the scopes that we want to be able to do. The technology for handling chemistry is very different than the technology for handling economics or for handling accounting or for anatomy and physiology and lots of other fields. So trying to take one technology and push it beyond the scope of what it's capable of doing, I think, is an exercise in futility. It's much better in order to use the technologies to focus on different fields, but bring them all together into an individual platform. And that's what we actually do. It's something akin to how learning management systems operate, where you have different vendors that put in different tools in order to be able to operate that. So Adapt has two types of questions. It has the auto-graded questions and the open-ended questions. And the open-ended questions are easier to address first. Those are the questions that require a human in order to grade. Students can upload text, they can upload audio, they can upload files, videos. We record videos in a new type of format that we'll be releasing soon, that provides the opportunity for graders, oftentimes instructors. So in my case, I have a lot of TAs because I'm in a large R1 institution that's able to go in and review and grade these things quite effectively. On the other side, which is where most of our effort has been focused on, is the auto-graded capabilities, the infrastructure where students submit something and then the computer then evaluates whether it's correct or not correct and assigns the grades that's out there. And we have 4 critical technologies or classes of technologies that we've integrated into this umbrella that we call Adapt. The first one is web work. Web work is a technology that originated out of the University of Rochester, but expanded into many different campuses, both developmental and adoption over the last 30 years. It focused predominantly on mathematics and engineering. It's an algorithmic-based infrastructure, and it's based off of coding so that you can essentially build any question that you want within limits, and you just have to write the code behind it in order to be able to reflect that. And the key point in order to emphasize this for any of these sort of questions is that an auto-graded question is just a mini program. The issue is, how do you write that program? Do you actually write it in script where you actually write down in structured languages if you're comfortable with that? Or do you have a graphical infrastructure behind it that limits the capabilities but reduces the barrier in order to be able to implement it? So with web work, you have to write code out, in this case here, Perl, in order to be able to construct the question. So there's a bit of a barrier in order to do it, but it's exceedingly powerful. It gives you the opportunity to do algorithmic capabilities. So you can make it so every student gets a different number or a different randomized part of the question. There's lots of really cool stuff associated with web work. iMath AS is the technology underlying MyOpenMath, which many of us have probably heard under that brand name. It's the same technology underlying Lumen Learning's OHM system and XYZ homework system, although those two latter ones are for-profit enterprises, which I typically tend to stay away from, whilst MyOpenMath is the enterprise that David Lipman, the originator of the iMath AS technology, generates and shares to the community in order to capitalize on. iMath AS has similar capabilities to web work. The reason that we have both of them here is because they come with their own set of libraries. So web work has a library. It's called the Open Problem Library, or OPL, that has about 40,000 questions. iMath AS has many questions that tapped into it. Lipman gave us about 40,000 questions also for that thing. So when we just started our infrastructure, we had 80,000 questions out of the gate, ready to go. Many of the math is available. The technologies don't play well together. Can't take a web work question and put in iMath AS or vice versa, but they have similar capabilities, and it just depends upon whether you like to code in Perl or you like to code in PHP. iMath AS. Complementing those is H5P. So H5P is a relatively new technology. It came north of the Arctic Circle in Norway. It was recently purchased by D2L, Desire to Learn. It's not entirely clear what that means in terms of the future of D2L, but it's an open source technology that differs from the web work and iMath AS technologies. It's a very graphical infrastructure. It's really easy in order to be able to use because it uses pre-made question types that you can come in. So you don't have the flexibility to build any sort of question that you want unless you want to start to build your own entry into it, which almost nobody does except for a core set of programmers. If you did do that, you would be writing it in JavaScript just to lay out the range of technologies that we have here. The nice thing about H5P, again, is it's easy to use. If you want something very graphical, moving, drag and drop, that's great. The limitation associated is that it's very graphical. And if you don't have well-functioning eyes, you have students with visual disabilities, then it actually has serious problems. In fact, of the 60 question types that H5P has, our analysis basically comes up with only 5 to 6 of them are meeting the WCAG, or the American with Disabilities Act, for accessibility out there. And that's a serious issue because we have both ethical and legal requirements for accessibility out there. So it's very important in order to use H5P in a very careful manner. And ADAPT is designed in order to have an alternative technology in order to back up H5P, in order to make it so that if students require it, they can do that. And I could talk about that later on if people have a desire for it. The other issue with H5P, which is important, exceedingly important, because it's oftentimes brushed underneath the rug, is that it's client-side technology. So if you're unfamiliar with that term, basically what it's saying is that the technology that evaluates whether a question is right or wrong is the technology on the computer that you're actually looking at the H5P. And that means you can actually hack into it. How do you hack into it? You look at the source code on your browser and you can see the answer. So H5P is a very insecure technology. So if you want to use that as the technology for homework, for high stakes homework, or for quizzing, you very much do not want to do that. Unfortunately, there are organizations and people in the community that brush it under the rug in order to argue that H5P is a solution for homework. It is not a solution for homework. So with those things aside, it's a good complement for what we have within our infrastructure. The last one is what we call native. Native just means it's coded up directly into ADAPT, while these other 3 ones have their own microservices or their own individual servers that operate them. That includes, and this is the last acronym I'm going to give here, QTI, Question and Test Interoperability. That's the protocol that underlies your most learning management systems. Moodle uses a thing called GIFT, but most of the ones, Canvas, Desire, Learn, Blackboard and such, uses QTI, and it's meant for interoperability so that you can actually move things around. The word interoperability is probably a little too sold, because it's actually not quite as interoperable as people would like it to be. But nonetheless, if you have a question bank already in your LMS, we could take it and convert it and bring it into our platform. I encourage, if anyone has any question bank you want to contribute to the platform as a shared platform for anyone to tap into, or at least any verified instructor to tap into, please contact us in order to do that. Folded also into native are other technologies that we've implemented, largely due to support from other partners. For example, the technical schools in Wisconsin have introduced the or funded the development of next generation nursing questions that we brought into ADAPT. In fact, this is ADAPT is the only open source next generation nursing question infrastructure out there. We also have other types of technology that I'll be talking about that folds into native, including a sketcher for organic chemistry, a virtual dissection tool for anatomy and physiology and architecture, and a few other things like the accounting things, the spreadsheet that we're using for accounting. So anyways, the upshot is that this has a range of different technologies. We're going to be embedding more and more technologies into ADAPT as we go in order to handle this comprehensive aspect behind it. But the key point is, irrespective of which technology you use, you have the same interface. So the barrier in terms of using and adopting them is such that, actually, let me take a step back here. The student who's taking or using ADAPT for their Spanish class will have the same interactions as if they were using it for their chemistry, or using it for their anatomy, or using it for the other class, math, physics, whatever class out there. So they don't have to learn and switch from one technology to another technology. That reduces the barrier and confusion associated with that. The same thing also makes it easier for distribution of the content from one field to another field that's out there. So just to show you a general overview of that, if you took web work or any other homework infrastructure, it has a module that includes the problem builder. It has a library. It has a searching infrastructure through that library. It has assessment delivery. It has a checker of some form. It has a grade book, and it has a learning management system interface, typically what's called LTI. I know I promised no acronyms, but that's the last acronym. Coincidentally, it's named by the same people who introduced QTI that's before, which is now called One Tech. Uh, if you did it with iMathAS, it has its own infrastructure. H5P has its own infrastructure, although it's not entirely designed like that. QTI has its own infrastructure. So if you actually want, as an instructor, to master one or master all these technologies, you don't. Why? Because there's a lot on the screen for you to be able to master. You pick the one that you like, and then you move with that, just like you do with a variety of other purposes out there. What we do is we take all these technologies, we fold it underneath the ADAPT infrastructure. We then have a centralized problem library, centralized search capability, a centralized gradebook, and centralized learning management interface, such that an instructor can come in and they can use a question. It's a web work question in an assignment, and the next question could be an H5P, and the next question can be QTI or iMathAS. You're not limited to just that specific technology. It's all centralized and is ready in order to be able to use. Now, obviously, if you're going to be building the questions from scratch, you need to use the corresponding components associated with that technology. So if you want to build the question, you need to actually, in WebWork, you need to use the WebWork interface or the iMathAS interface for doing that. But the idea behind here is that if you build this corpus of questions, which currently exceeds 250,000 questions that we've gotten so far, and you make it big enough, it then makes it more powerful of a tool for us to be able to come in and find the questions that's available. And ADAPT is available right now for any verified instructor in order to be able to come and get access to the questions as a question bank. No questions, well, I don't want to say no questions asked. We want to get verification you're an instructor so that you're not a student tapping into it. Otherwise, it's a massive question bank and a benefit for the open community and the academic community as a whole. ADAPT is designed for multiple applications. The students can access ADAPT directly. That was what the link that was put into the chat gives you a formative interface for that, or the QR code that I put up front. Students can also, or actually faculty can build what I refer to as textbooks of the future. They can take their textbook, oftentimes LibreTexts books, and they embed the questions directly into their textbook, whether there's H5P or the more interactive, more powerful technologies into it. So now the textbook becomes a homework system. And if you want students to engage with the textbook, this is one mechanism for doing so, because students typically do their homework, kind of, many of the times. And this forces them in order to be able to engage with the material in the textbook off of that. We're waiting for final approval from the iPhone store and the Android store in order to release our phone app. So this provides another interface. So 50% of the students that access our textbook material, OER material, access it through their phone. So that's their digital technology of choice. So let's bring the homework to their technology and let them use it, although the web interface is perfectly fine on the phone. You don't need this. However, this provides the opportunity in order to use ADAPT for in-class polling response system. So it's that in order to take the place of iClicker technologies, which is actually approximately the same cost as a homework system. If you actually look at the costs out there. So you get a 2-for-1 associated with that. And lastly, irrespective of how students actually interact or submit scores, we can pass back the scores to your learning management system, typically via LTI, although with Canvas, we also have what's called the API, or the application programming interface, gives you a bit more power than what the LTI comes into. So it's multimodal. People use it from a variety of different purposes. Some students or some instructors don't even have the LMS, and they just download the scores and then upload the scores. It's up to them. ADAPT is multimodal in its delivery. So most of us are familiar with homework within a very simplified manner of courses, assignments, and questions. The questions are opened at this date and time, and they're closed at this date and time. You may have a late policy in order to extend that, and that's how you deliver them. But the reason that ADAPT is called ADAPT is that it was actually built with the intent in order to build a adaptive learning infrastructure behind that. Now, we didn't implement an algorithmic based black box mechanism in order to do so, because it takes a bit of time for doing that. It takes a lot more money in order to do that, and it's reliability is sometimes suspect, especially in the beginning of its development. We took a white box based approach that's formulated around decision trees. We call them learning trees. So instead of giving a single question to a student, we can give a tree to a student. If a student gets a root question wrong, they have the opportunity to go into these nodes, which act as expositions or minor assessments that takes the root question and dissects it into the components, the skills that they need in order to be able to master that question. So it acts as a virtual tutor of sorts. But the trick here is that we don't actually force the students to go in one pathway or versus the other. Students actually engage with the tree themselves, something like a choose your own adventure story, assuming those books still exist that are out there. I like this a lot more than the black box infrastructure for two primary reasons. One is this facilitates metacognition skills. And it's difficult in order to build metacognition skills in our students, to teach students to recognize what they know and what they don't know, because that's what we want them to build, to demonstrate when they graduate and be self-reflective. This gives them the opportunity in order to identify, well, they say, what do they know, what do they don't know, and they go through the paths that gives them the greatest chance of being able to earn a do-over and be successful at the tree up there. So that's the incentive off of there. The second thing off of here, and this is part of the greater theme of how we operate, is that students that are more engaged are more likely to learn from the material that's out there. So this, instead of giving students or treating students like babies, where we actually spoon feed what they need to be able to learn at one step over another step, we can get students engaged with the material, and they're more likely to actually appreciate what they're learning, and they're more likely to learn from the material that's out there. The problem with this is that you don't just create a single question, you have to create a whole infrastructure behind here, and that takes a bit of time in order to do. We have somewhere in the order of 400 to 500 learning trees, mostly in general chemistry, but we've started to expand into other fields, and other people can come in and create their own trees that are out there. So that's why ADAPT is called ADAPT. So let me tie it all together. We have a range of different technologies that constitutes the either auto-graded or even open-ended question types that all folds into the ADAPT interface that's consistent irrespective of which technology you do. You can embed questions directly in your textbook if you want. Students can access it directly if they want, or they can access it via the learning management system if they want. And it can correspondingly pass grades out there. So it's a bit of a variety. People choose, or instructors choose, the ones that they're most comfortable with. Okay, so that was supposed to be 10 minutes of conversation, which was not 10 minutes of conversation. So I will.
That's okay. We're going to see the demo, right?
Yes. Okay. So I mentioned before that ADAPT is freely available to any verified instructor as a question bank. All you need to do is go to the website, and I'm pasting the website right now into the chat. I'm already signed in, but it doesn't stop me from showing it from the very beginning. Let me refresh it. And it looks like that. And you just basically request an account right here. And you provide some justification that you are an instructor of record, so that or not a record, but at least a verified instructor in order to get you the access on here. So I'm going to sign in. And this is my account that I use in my classroom. So I've been using ADAPT almost from the first 3 months of its development in my courses. So I have a range of courses here, all the way from fall of 21 to what's planned next term that's out there, plus a few other things that are part of development that's out there. So we've had about 650 active classes since we started, and we've been growing exponentially. So this term we have about 250 or so courses, and then a year ago we had like 30 or something like that. So we've been really growing like gangbusters. So anyways, let me just show you one of my courses. This is my course. It's color coded because those colors mean something. It's not because I like a lot of colors out here. If this right here is a course has assignments have questions. So if the questions happen to be learning trees, then I call that assignment of learning trees and orchard, but no one seems to actually appreciate that. So it's just another type of assignment. So here's a list of assignments that I have here for my course. I have a lot of assignments for my course. If my students on day one see all the assignments for that course, they start freaking out. So I don't show them the questions, or I don't release the assignment to them to be able to see until a later date. So things that are red are assignments that they don't see until I manually release it or auto release. Things that are green are what students can see, and things that are orange are things that will be released at some point. Right now it's set for 5 days before the start of that assignment. So students get some warning off of that, but I'm not warning. So that's where the color codes come.
Uh-oh. Check.
In properly.
Yep.
Hold on one moment.
Yeah, a little bit of a blip. So students are seeing the adapt in their LMS, right?
They can.
Yeah.
So to be honest, I actually hate all LMSs. So I don't use I use Adapt instead of my LMS because it also gives me a bit more power in terms of how I handle gradebooks.
Okay.
LMSs do, but many instructors do use it as the in their LMS. We do deep linking, so you can click on it and it goes out. We can embed it into the platform. The reason I don't tend to push that is that we want to then provide ancillary tables and things that you may need. Like in chemistry, you need to access tables at different points, and that has to be part of the infrastructure. And I don't want to embed I'd have to embed the whole thing into Canvas or whatever LMS that you use. And it's just better, I think, to just go out via deep linking in order to do that.
Okay. I was just wondering what the student view of the course looks like.
Well, we can flip the switch here and show you what the student view of the course is. This is if I come in here right now. So first, they don't see any colors because it's not any of their business, and you just see the ones that are released. So right now, I have some labs and I have some practices and some discussions, and these will start to expand as time progresses. You can see that. I already have the dates and times all ready to go for next winter term when I start teaching. I don't have an Adapt or a Canvas instance to show you that, but basically when you embed it into Canvas, it makes a quiz that you click on and just basically provides a link that you click on it and it comes out here and then you go to it with all the appropriate authentication and such, so you don't have to worry about signing in. If you use it outside of an LMS, then of course the students need to sign in for that, and such. Same thing if you use it on the phone. The phone will require signing the phone app because it's not via LTI deep linking approach for doing so. So I was trying to pull up a question here, but something happened on my computer. So this right here shows a question. I'm actually playing with a new question type that I'll comment about here. So again, like I said, courses have assignments have questions. So I'm in the assignment lecture 1. My pedagogy is that students should be submitting homework every single day of lecture. However, some days it's a lot of homework, like a weekly homework, and some days it's a lecture homework, which is what this is showing here, which is basically several problems to make sure the juices are flowing. And I think that's quite critical in terms of our education. And I've seen positive responses from the students associated with that. For example, I asked the students why they weren't cramming because I got information from how they use the textbook. And their response to me several years ago was there was no need to cram because I actually forced them to actually do the homework, do it all the way up to it. So that right there I consider to be a plus. Anyways, so ignore these sort of properties here. These are the questions that are out here. Students don't see the titles because titles come the questions can come from a variety of different sources. People title things in a variety of different ways. So if I want to, I can change the title that the students will see. Otherwise, it says question 1, question 2, question 3, which I'm just going to flip right here to show you that what the students see. And they just see question 1, question 2, question 3. And this is one that I'm playing with right here. So this right here shows a specific type of question. This is a web work-based question. We go through the effort to try to take all 4 of those technologies and make them look as close to each other as possible. There are subtle differences that you can know when you actually know what to look for in order to see one from the other. But the idea is that students don't need to be encumbered by the knowing about what's the nature of the technology underlying it, because it really doesn't matter for them to do so. So this right here is web work. And it's set up here as algorithmic. So these numbers change for each student that comes out there. If I submit the answer, this right here is if it were real time, which means I give students back their responses after submitting it. Most of the time, most of my assignments are delayed, so students don't get the responses back until I decide when it's all over. That's my pedagogy. And they have it broken up here. You will notice that I take conformance seriously. Every single question has an attribution button on it that gives you the associated licensing connected to that. That's going to be expanded so you can actually talk about what the attribution is of the question, what the attribution is for the author, for the solution, what the attribution is for an ancillary question that's connected to it, and have the whole breakdown right there. But this is something that, again, we take very seriously. So when you build a question, you have the attribution and it follows through, because most, if not all, of our questions are OER, and we want to be able to follow that. I'm going to flip this switch here so you just see the question itself. Here's the next question. It's just a simple multiple choice. Also a simple multiple choice. Again, these are meant in order to make sure the juices are flowing. I don't want students to spend a lot of time connected to that. This right here is a new technology that is based. It's a native technology, and it's what's called we call it discuss it question. So I'm not sure if people are familiar with VoiceThread or Flipgrid. So it's basically that sort of question type here. So can come in. They have a central core of media here, and students can actually have commentary on the side. Where the commentary can be text-based. That would be something like resembling hypothesis or nota bene or perusal. But you can also put in video or you can put in audio out there. And this is meant in order to encourage peer-to-peer communication quite strongly. I'm going to be using this by giving a very hard question here once a week. And I want the students, in order to dissect out the question and communicate amongst each other in order to be able to, because I believe strongly in that mode of operation in the way that we do things. And this will be released in the next week or two. We're just fine-tuning a few things out there, which, especially since Flipgrid shut down and VoiceThread's particularly pricey, this provides an opportunity in order to do so. This was designed for languages, especially Spanish as a second language, in order to be able to present. And I'd love to be able to show you it in action, but I don't have the FERPA protections on there, so I'd be showing student names and faces and that, and I don't want that. So this does emphasize that we're always constantly updating, always constantly building it, because we have access to the whole core of what we're doing here. We're not limited to just basically what the technology is. If we were to download it and say, this is what we have, and that's that type of thing. So that is the sort of questions that we have here. There are lots of other issues connected there that are not overly important for this perspective. And then you can see, well, this question here is going to be released on the 3rd of January, and that's when it turns green and students are able to access it. I can manually change it so that students can see it if I want to, and such. Okay, so we have a range of questions. Like I said, we have about 250,000 questions. Most of them are public, meaning that people have shared it in order to make sure that other people have shared it. But we have about 20 to 30,000 questions that people have created, and they don't want to share it. Now, it's fine. They're still able to capitalize on what adapt will help them in their classroom. But we like to encourage people to share as much as possible. And again, we're very protective of what those questions, who gets access to those questions, because we manually verified every single account that comes out there. It's one of the reasons why it takes several days in order to get an account, because we manually change it. So because we can come in, we can do searches in order to be able to identify these things. This is question number 1, which is an H5P question that's out there. And then you can have all the various questions here. We have authors, technology, all the various things that are connected to it. Many people who are familiar with these sort of question databases may recognize that many to most people don't provide meta tags associated with their questions. And that can cause difficulty in terms of finding those questions. So we have search capabilities based on titles and tags and things like that. It's still kind of dumb in the modern world, but we're going to be releasing our AI tool soon, and that's also going to pull in here, and it has a vector database in the back end, so you can come in and identify questions for natural language submissions. So you'll be able to do analysis within the questions and pull it out and find things in a better sense. We're also going to use AI to help meta tag the questions in order to make things a little bit more effective here, or meta tag. Meta tag the questions that are out there. But again, the point here is by bringing all these questions into a single repository, it makes it easier for everybody in order to move forward, instead of having it in small little snippets here and there, and then we end up recreating the wheel. And this is an underlying problem that we have with the way OER operates as a whole in the ecosystem. Too many fragmented efforts or little snippets here like that, and too much of a situation where we have 2 steps forward and then we have 1 step back because we are not building coherently with each other. So this is our approach in order to try to deal with it. It's basically the same sort of approach of how we help with textbooks, where we brought everything into a single repository and then we had control over it. It operates in the same theme for the same goal, and we expect the same level of success that comes off of there. I mentioned learning trees. This right here is a learning tree that you can build. Actually, right now it's not in the editor mode, that you can come in and then you can add these trees into a variety of things. So this has a question type here that is auto-graded web work. Then we have exposition. So we say, okay, if the student fails in that question, they can go into the learning tree, and it comes in with some details and say, well, look, this is what the learning tree is meant to address. These are the skills, the different branches. They give different expositions. This will give you text. This will give you video. Students decide what they actually prefer. This is practice problems and such as that. Basically, they have to go from the top to the bottom, and that's how they get a do-over, like a video game, and they can come back up and do this question again. So that's the carrot that's involved in that. The nice thing about this is this evaluates learning, because learning requires a pre and post in order to be able to evaluate it. We get the pre and post at the start of the tree and at the end of the tree, instead of just having a single measurement that doesn't necessarily, a single performance that doesn't necessarily measure learning, it measures performance. And that right there, well, our analysis shows that this works well. And there are lots of other studies out there that show that this is superior than an individual question out there. The problem is it takes a lot of effort in order to create these trees and make the trees operate well that's out there. And we've been doing that for a bit here. So you can go through the various trees and you can build them as you want. And I encourage people in order to take a look at them. I believe quite strongly in them. And they they work well. I know I'm repetitive there. So that's sort of the upshot behind here. I can go into more details if people are interested in this, including how you construct questions and depending on the different question types and things like that. We've been working and trying to build the integrated aspect of here. I will want to mention one thing, though, not necessarily focusing on what a question looks like. How to build a question, but you take this question right here. So this is the rendered output of the question. Now, let me switch to advanced mode and edit. This is what a question looks like. So every question we have actually has 4 blocks. The first block has the meta tags associated with that question. So we have revisions. So every version of that question, we can go back and track that. We have dates, descriptions, public, private, attribution requirements for the open licensing that's connected to it. meta tags that we have added to it. Those tags can either be free range tags that you just throw down, or based on a framework of learning objectives or skills that we have put in place in order to provide a centralized learning infrastructure. That's really useful for the learning analytics, which I forgot to actually mention. I was going to be talking about that. The second one is the question type. This right here is actually what the question looks like. So this is what the author of the question built in order to do that. So if this is scary, no worries. You don't need to know how to write a question in order to be able to use the question that's actually created. And if you want to create a question, this is not your cup of tea, then you use H5P or the QTI question that's like your LMS, because that's a graphical interface in order to be able to do it. It's just that this right here provides a lot more flexibility. That a graphical interface will just be throttling down your capabilities. But what I wanted to emphasize was this block right here, which is the accessibility alternatives, which is a relatively unique thing that's out there. So I mentioned that there are technologies that are not terribly accessible, specifically H5P. So QTI in our system is accessible. You can create inaccessible web work and iMath AS questions is responsible for the author in order to be able to do that well, and we provide guidance for that. However, if you use H5P and you try to drag things around, you are not going to be compliant with ADA. So what do? Well, you query accessibility experts at 100 different campuses, and you'll get one general response, which is you can't use it, period. That's not it. However, that's not entirely true. You can use it if you have an alternative that's available for students that require it. And that's what this thing is set up here. So you can actually have an alternative right here. So that if this question right here were not accessible, you can provide an alternative accessibility. Most questions can be constructed into a series of multiple choice questions. They'll be long, they'll be clunky, drag and drop can be made into multiple choice questions, but it's difficult in order to be able to, no, I would say difficult. It's just say it's not the optimal way in order to use it if you don't have any disabled students requiring it. So by providing an auto-graded alternative, or even a text-based alternative that you don't have the opportunity in order to make auto-grade, both of those are perfectly fine. You can make it so you can use these question types that are inaccessible, but perfectly fine for 99.9% of the students that are out there. And that is a key component that I think is relatively unique in the way that Adapt is designed in order to be able to handle accessibility from top down in the way that we actually implement these things. And then we have the supplemental content, the answer, solutions, hints, notes. Notes are private notes, annotations for those questions for the next person that's out there. And such. So I could come in, I can modify this question, and then I can preview it and then tweak it back and forth in order to do so. I'm having some problems with my internet today. So it's not a great description. I need to find out why. So the last thing before Alan throws something through the computer screen at me is the analytics. And we've been building analytics for much of this year. And let me take a look at one of my classes here. So let's say we took something that's kind of big. And I don't know if I've set up analytics on here. I have to turn on the analytics, so I may not. I haven't set it up. Okay, so I have no data yet. So I basically have to turn it on here. So I provide the opportunity in order to get descriptive analytics. So here's the student, each student, and here's the performance for every assignment that's out there, average compared to the average. But we also have the ability in order to look at time on task or time in review. So the time that students spent doing the problem before it's due, or the time that they spent reviewing the problems after it's due. And it's probably not surprising to people, but the vast majority of students don't go back and use their homework as a study guide, which is actually quite unfortunate because it's a very useful study guide.
Right.
We have learning objectives, so you can identify if you have demonstrated compliance with your learning objective guidelines in your syllabus. in order to say, here are all the learning objectives and the performance is connected to it. Again, I apologize, I don't have an example in order to do that. We have an early warning system to identify students that require some intervention. That's about, with 80% accuracy, we can identify if a student's going to fail the class within the first 2 weeks of the class. Get raw data. We've been building learning curves in order to identify, you can test different pedagogies and identify how long it takes, meaning how many times a student gets exposed to a specific concept, that they master that concept. And you can use that to tweak your performance out there. The issue that we have there is you have to have a lot of interactions in order to be able to get really good statistics off of there. So we're still trying to figure out how to make that work and such. And I will also mention that the analytics also connects to the textbook. So if you use the LibreTexts textbook, you can identify when students read the book, what they read off the book, and cross-reference that based off the learning objectives to the resource that you have out there. And that's where you can track or you can do studies on student performance, student studying habits, cramming, and other things like that. So anyways, I know that when Alan gets closer to the screen, that's time for me to actually stop.
You gave a hell of a demo, Delmar.
I will encourage anybody in order to take a look at it. Again, if you're a verified instructor, it's freely available for you to tap into. I don't know any faculty member that doesn't want to have access to 250,000 questions that are freely put down there, algorithmic and ready to go. And you can do so if you request an account at the adapt.libretext.org.
And so, I mean, for someone coming in, what's the best start is to work off of, can you see other examples, or do you start just rummaging for your questions?
So can I take the screen again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Okay, there we go. So you have the ability in order to bring in any existing course that someone has made public. So you can parse through and you find a question, you find a course that may be what you want. Now, because we are comprehensive, there are numerous gaps out there, but we are expanding this quite quickly. We've also have a set of courses that is what we call the commons courses. And that right there are the courses that we curate ourselves. So for example, we bring in the OpenStax questions. We bring in all the OpenStax questions. We convert them to auto-graded as applicable, make solutions for them, which are oftentimes missing or not terribly pedagogically useful, make it algorithmic, and then you can tap into and pull through. So the first step is to see what other people have created before having to build something yourself. Some people do build from scratch. Some people just grab some other course that they have actually put together. For example, Christina Moons and try to leave a I don't have the right accent there, a Spanish course from Chabot College, or if you want to bring in a chemistry to OpenStax. The problem with this is that this comes in with 17,000 questions. No one uses it, 1,700 questions. No one uses all those questions that are out there. I do want to mention something which is really cool, and the URL gave you the access to it, and that right there are some of the cooler things that we are doing. And I wanted to actually bring up, so this right here is the organic chemistry sketcher, which gives us the opportunity to build these molecules and evaluate these molecules. This is going to be connected to the phone app, so that we'll be able to allow students to draw these molecules on a piece of paper, access the phone app and the next generation's camera, and then basically take a picture of it. It takes a picture and does the OCR, optical character recognition, converts it into the molecule and puts it together. And that's closer to what students used to do. And students don't need to get involved with the details associated with being able to do that, which I think is really cool.
Right.
The other thing is this one, which we haven't wired into Adapt yet, but we are going to do this. And this was built for interactive anatomy. Here we go. And it's taking a little bit longer because they put a background onto it. And it provides a molecule right here, not a molecule, sorry, an object that is component into different things here. So you can ask questions like, which one's the mandible? We can also, if we switch the mode, make it so you can rip this thing apart. so you can actually interact with it dynamically. These things will be embeddable into our textbooks as a widget for playing with, but this is as a homework system that you can come in and then just basically have them, name off the different parts that you come into, and being able to have something a lot more interactive. Anatomy is where we started with this, but we have interest in faculty from architecture and faculty from computer information systems, where they want to build a computer and they actually have the computer components that they pop into it and they're able to process it.
Wow.
So if anything that has spatial aspects that you want to impart into students, we can implement into a grading infrastructure within Adapt. And I think this is pretty cool. And there are a handful of other ones, that type of technologies that we are very excited to release next year. But sorry, I just really wanted to show this because I've been lusting over this for several years, and it's just about coming to fruition.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and there's much more we know, and there's much more happening. So it's just so fantastic to get this taste of it. This is the most I've seen of it. So I got a lot out of it, Delmar.
Thank you. I'm very happy with what we've done. Like I said, it's a very valuable resource. At least we believe it's a very valuable resource for the open community. And we encourage people to capitalize on it.
Well, fantastic. I hope people dive in after getting a taste of it. And I think it's time for your dog to go out.
Yeah, she's out.
Okay. All right. I really appreciate you taking the time, Delmar. This has been a great session.
Thank you again.